Today on the Royal Palmcast, we welcome mortgage broker Scott DiGregorio back to the studio to talk appraisals. Scott details the process for real estate appraising and why a looming shortage of qualified appraisers should be of concern to realtors, home buyers, and sellers. You can listen in on our conversation beginning right now.
Welcome to the Royal Palmcast, the show about everything real estate with a personal touch. From the production studios of the Royal Palm Coast Realtor Association in Fort Myers, Florida, here's your host, Jim Sanville.
Welcome to the Royal Palmcast. I am indeed your host, Jim Sanville, coming to you today, as usual, from the studios of the Royal Palm Coast Realtor Association in beautiful and sunny Fort Myers, Florida. Here today, as usual, with our board op and director of marketing and communications, Jerry Johnson.
Hey, that's me.
That's Jerry Johnson over there.
Hi, everybody.
Hey, Jerry.
Hey.
Good to see you.
Thanks.
Good to see you. This is the show where we talk about real estate, just about every aspect of it, from the perspective of the realtor, but also we have lots of great content if you're a home buyer or home seller. And today, especially for all three groups, we've got a super interesting show because we have someone in the studio with us who's been with us before. His name is Scott DiGregorio. Welcome, Scott.
Well, thank you very much. Glad to be here.
We are more than thrilled to have you. You've been on a couple of times. We've talked about mortgages. Today, we're going to switch gears a bit and talk about a very, very mysterious area as far as I'm concerned, and I hope you can change that by the end of the program. Our topic today is appraisals. And you've seen an appraisal or two in your business, right?
I may have. I may have seen a couple.
May have. So you're gonna kind of educate us about what that world is all about and what home buyers, home sellers, and realtors need to know about the appraisal world.
Absolutely.
Go.
All right. So there's a lot of misconceptions out there, and as you guys know, I teach a class at the association where I kind of demystify the methodology that an appraiser uses to determine value. And what the disconnect a lot of times is that buyers, sellers, and real estate agents really live off a price per square foot type of valuation model, and appraisers are just simply not allowed to use that. They have to use something called a paired comparison approach. In preparation for writing my appraisal class, I interviewed several appraisers for months. And the paired comparison approach, the easiest example I could give, you have two houses absolutely identical in every way, except one has a pool and one doesn't. The pool home sold for $30,000 more, therefore the pool is worth $30,000. People will come back and say, that's crazy, that pool cost easily $75,000, doesn't matter. That is the essence in a very simplified way of the paired comparison approach.
So these are comps.
100% comps.
Okay.
And what people don't understand a lot of times or don't think about is that in the example I just gave where everything matches up just perfectly, it's just not reality. The reality is nothing matches up perfectly. So when you try doing a paired comparison approach on 20, 30 different components of each home, all of a sudden it seems to be a lot more complicated than a basic CMA might be. Mm-hmm. And then in addition to that, we have some challenges with the appraiser industry right now. There's a real shortage of appraisers in America, and maybe if we have time, we could talk about what's going on with that, as well as what's going to happen with that moving forward.
So 2 appraisers, 3 appraisers, 4 appraisers go in and appraise the same home. How wide would you expect the range of valuations to be?
On paper, it shouldn't be much, Jim, but I've actually been in a situation where I had 2 identical houses side by side being purchased by one person, 2 different deals, 2 different appraisers, and the appraisals came in one day apart, about 20% off in value.
That could be significant.
It's enormous, and look, frankly, sometimes it's a bad appraisal.
What do you do? Split the difference?
You
can't do that.
No, you can't do that. And one of the challenges in the appraisal industry is that the government identified after the crash that one of the problems contributing to the crash was lenders and loan officers and banks leaning on appraisers to hit values. And anybody who was in the industry back then would know that happened. And so what they did was they created this intermediary called a appraisal management company. So basically nowadays, you put in an appraisal request through an appraisal management company. They have a roster of appraisers, and they select the appraiser. I don't know who's doing the appraisal until the appraisal comes in. Now, from a standpoint of I want to make sure the appraiser's not being influenced, check, they've done a great job. However, sometimes they're bringing in appraisers that aren't that good. Sometimes they're bringing in appraisers that are overworked. Sometimes they're bringing in appraisers from out of town. And this is where the challenges start to come in because, people talk about the quote-unquote housing market. And the truth is this, each neighborhood could be its own market. I'll go a step further. You look at the condo community of Heritage Palms, just to pick one, and the estate community of Heritage Palms. They're a 45-second drive apart, but they're two different markets. So, when you start dealing with out-of-town appraisers or maybe appraisers that are too busy to put in the time, or maybe they're unique properties, that's when things start to get a little difficult.
Do they tend to err on the side of a low valuation or a high valuation?
It's hard to say. I would say the appraisers I know really try to get the valuation right. But it's a lot of times it's a lot harder than people think it is. I think the average appraiser is really trying to do a good job and come up with a fair valuation. On the purchase side of things, the purchase contract's uploaded. They know what the purchase price is, but they still have rules to follow.
Let me ask this way. Who do you find is more disappointed more often, the buyers or the sellers with the appraisal?
It's a good question, Jim. And the reality is this. I tell people all the time, when an appraisal comes in low, we got four options. One, the buyer makes up the difference. That makes the seller happy. Two, the seller drops the price to cover the shortage. That makes the buyer happy. Three, the more likely option, everybody negotiates and meets in the middle. Fourth option, of course, is everybody just walks away, and that's that. Yeah. So in a situation, the most common situation where they meet in the middle, I would say they're both a little unhappy with it, right? Maybe the seller's taking a little bit less money than he or she wanted. Maybe the buyer's bringing more money to the table than he or she wanted. In this market, of course, the willingness of sellers to drop price to cover a short appraisal is a lot more difficult than in a quote-unquote normal market.
There should be no surprises, right? When the appraisal comes in, no big surprises anyway.
You would be surprised at the stuff you see sometimes. I just had an appraiser yesterday. It was on a refinance, and the value was perfectly fine to get the deal done. But the person had a nice dock in the back of his house, and this particular appraiser and by the way, the appraiser came from another lender, it wasn't mine, but this particular appraiser assigned zero value to that dock at all, as if it didn't exist. That's a little difficult for people to accept because in the real world, having a nice dock in the back of your house absolutely impacts the value of your home. This particular appraiser disagreed.
Now, the neighborhood I live in, I happen to live on a canal. I'm very fortunate to do that, and it's beautiful, 200-foot canal, nice view, Gulf access right there. The houses across the street from me, without water access, direct water access, are valued far, far lower, of course.
Of course.
Now, in a place like Cape Coral, it has 400 miles of navigable canals and waterways. How much value is assigned to proximity to water? Is there like a direct correlation?
So, it depends a little bit. Every neighborhood's different. And you bring up a good point. Like even, what you're saying in the Cape is very factual. Even going down the McGregor corridor, the river side of McGregor and the non-river side of McGregor are two different housing markets. In my opinion, a good appraiser is going to stay within that specific housing market. So if you're on the waterfront side of the street, then the comparables that are pulled should be from the same. I've seen situations where houses across the street are worth 20, 30, 40% less, accurately so, because it's just an entirely different world.
Okay. How often are deals blown up due to the appraisal not coming in as expected?
So I don't have an answer for that, but I do have an anecdotal one. In my world, I have problems with appraisals on about 5% of the deals I do, sometimes a little bit higher, but figure 5%. And out of that, I'm able to keep those deals together almost exclusively, maybe one or two a year. We won't be able to come to terms. In my experience, Jim, usually when that is the case, it is a result of egos and people's feelings getting hurt. Yeah. A seller being told that their home isn't worth what they thought it was or what their buyer thought it was is an emotional thing. And I understand that emotions sometimes get in the way of logic. But it's part of the game.
Yeah. What can a seller do to assure a fair, I won't say too high appraisal, but a fair appraisal?
I think some of the things that sellers can do. I think first off, working with a good real estate professional that's going to help them stage the home properly and get the home up to, kind of up to par, so to speak.
Staging makes a big difference.
Staging makes a big difference. It's
even in a hot market.
Yeah, it does, and it's difficult. If you speak to appraisers, they'll tell you that furnishings and things like that have absolutely no bearing on the valuation process.
Because justice is blind, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But where the theory comes off the rails is when they tell me on the side, look, sometimes you walk into a house and it has a certain feel to it. And that's where it gets dicey. I teach in my class that appraising is an art form, not a science. Mm-hmm. And sometimes things feel a certain way. Like there's two components of an appraisal where they talk about the quality of construction and then the condition of the home. And, it's amazing what a coat of paint or something might do to the feel of those two things. And again, I would say that if you spoke to most appraisers, they wouldn't really verbalize this, but I've had several appraisers tell me that, look, it gets a little gray sometimes because you get a feel for things. I would imagine if you have real estate agents listening to this that have been in the business a long time, they could walk into a house or even hear an address and get a feel for what that home is worth.
Yeah.
That's called experience, and it's a real thing.
I remember when I lived in Hillsborough County, I used to take early morning walks. And in my neighborhood, everything was good, smelled nice, looked neat and clean. But in my walking route, there was a section of a nearby community where there was some swamp or low-lying water, and it just didn't smell good in the morning, especially. Mm-hmm. And I remember thinking, that's the kind of thing where you may look to buy a house, virtually and see this, wow, that's beautiful, but you don't get that smell. Can things like that are almost intangible come into play in an appraisal?
I would, again, on the record, probably not, but off the record, probably yes. It gets difficult. At its core, an appraiser is going to look at square footage, bedrooms, bath, quality of construction, condition of home, things of that nature. But it's the feel comes into play. And the other piece that comes into play as well that a lot of people don't think about is, if you have a smelly home, to use your example, is the appraiser able to look at comparables and determine whether or not they're also smelly?
Yeah.
And the answer is no, obviously, because they're not going inside the other comps. So, that's where things get unique. What I always tell my audiences when I speak on the subject is, if you have the nicest house in the neighborhood, you may have a problem. If you have the biggest house in the neighborhood, you may have a problem. If you have the most upgraded house in the neighborhood, you may have a problem. If a house is all three of those things, either cash or large down payments are going to be the right offers to accept in those situations.
Gotcha. All right. Hey, Scott, we're up against a quick break here, so if you don't mind hanging out with us, we will be right back after this.
Hi, this is Sandra Aguilar, President of the Women's Council of Realtors Cape Coral, Fort Myers, and you are listening to the Royal Palmcast.
Hey, this is Tommy Santor from Bella Casa Services, and you're listening to the Royal Palmcast.
Hi, I'm Kim Swanson. You're listening to the Royal Palmcast.
Education, you need it, we've got it. I'm Angela Foster, Director of Education at Royal Palm Coast Realtor Association. If you're a realtor in Southwest Florida, the Royal Palm Coast Realtor Association has the classes, courses, workshops, and webinars you need to stay at the top of your game and keep your license current. Looking to build your continuing education hours? We offer core law and code of ethics classes to fulfill your CE requirement, along with many other courses to fulfill your requirements for specialty credits. Want to learn the ins and outs of the specific market you serve? Our A series provides an in-depth look at Cape Coral and Fort Myers with all the right experts to fill you in. Our contract series is a 5-session course on listing agreements, FAR contracts, timelines, and more. It doesn't end there. Classes like how to stay out of real estate jail, negotiating skills, listing tips, conflict resolution, and many more keep realtors in Lee County up to speed with the latest information. Many of our classes are free to members and some are open to non-members. If you're a real estate professional who's interested in working in the Southwest Florida market, we've got you covered. For more information, visit our website at rpcra.org or email education@rpcra.org.
We hope you're enjoying the Royal Palmcast, a production of the Royal Palm Coast Realtor Association, your association for realtor resources, services, and education in Southwest Florida. We're committed to the success of all our members and advocate for property rights, both commercial and residential. We continue our efforts educating and influencing policymakers at all levels about issues important to realtors and homeowners. RPCRA also leads the way with community involvement, market analysis, and member engagement, all of which contribute to a superior realtor experience. With 2 convenient locations in Fort Myers and Cape Coral, the staff of RPCRA is here for you. You'll find us online at rpcra.org and across social media, including Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, SoundCloud, and all major podcast apps. Be sure to subscribe, like, share, and follow us to stay current on all our upcoming classes and events. Now, back to Jim Sanville and the Royal Palmcast.
We are back on the Royal Palmcast. I'm Jim Sanville along with Jerry Johnson.
Hello.
And our guest is Scott DiGregorio, who is a mortgage expert in that he is branch manager of a real estate company here in Fort Myers, Florida. What's the name of your company again? Primary
Residential
Mortgage. Not that I didn't remember, but I just missed your voice over the break. It was tough. It was tough. You're also an educator, a real estate educator. You talk about mortgages, appraisals, things of that nature, as well as a podcaster.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you do the Real Estate of Tomorrow podcast.
I do.
Available wherever you get finer podcasts. I think they are available. And you're also a YouTuber.
Yes.
Find you there. What's the name of your channel?
Fort Myers Mortgage Expert is where you could find me across all the social media platforms as well as my website.
Very cool. We will be checking that out further. I am a regular viewer and have enjoyed your content. So
Thank you.
You guys are doing a great job. So we're back talking about appraisals on today's show. And you mentioned before the break, right at the beginning of the program, Scott, that there's a shortage of qualified licensed appraisers.
Indeed.
Tell me about what are the prospects in that field? Is it a good field to get into? How would you do it?
So it is a good industry, Jim, and you know there's been talk in the industry that they're trying to replace appraisers with computers. There's a lot of automated valuation models. I'm sure everybody listening is familiar with Zestimates and things of that nature. I don't see how we could ever fully replace appraisers with computers. There's too many variables there for it to be done effectively. The challenge we have now, though, is the path to become an appraiser is a long one, way longer than it is to get the mortgage license or the real estate license. You do need a 4-year college degree. You then need several years of internship. So we're talking a career path of 6+ years here to become an appraiser.
Like a doctor.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. You can get your real estate license relatively simple. You can get your mortgage license even simpler than that. Yet it's many years to become an appraiser. And I forget the exact number, but I believe the average age of an appraiser in America today is late 50s. I want to say 59 or something of that nature. So what's happening is a lot of the experienced appraisers are not willing to bring on the apprentices because there's some liability associated with that. And they're just kind of cruising towards retirement. Right now, I know appraisers that are making heavy 6-figure incomes per year. There's more work than they could handle. With this appraiser shortage that's going on right now, a lot of people are having trouble finding appraisers to do the deals. I am routinely having appraisers come back to me and say, "Hey, I'll do that appraisal, but it's going to cost you an extra $200," which is interesting because you're not allowed to pass that cost on to the client. That's a cost you have to absorb, that I have to absorb as a branch manager. So, it seems kind of extortionist, but it is what it is. You got to get the deal done. So. That dynamic is going on, and I spoke to the president of one of the biggest AMCs in the country, and I said, "Hey, what's the plan for this long term?" And he said, "Honestly, this is going to get worse, Scott." He said, "In the coming 12, 24 months, we have more and more." I think he said that they were expecting 6,000 appraisers nationally to retire and only 200 to 400 new ones to come on board.
Well, that's a kind of bottleneck that could gum up the whole industry, right?
This is impacting the whole industry.
So what do we need? Appraiser reform, or what's going on? How do we deal with it?
There is talk of shortening the requirements, of bringing it down from a 4-year college degree to maybe an associate's, maybe bringing the apprenticeship time period down. Something is going to have to give. I'm not sure what 5 or 10 years down the road looks like, but I know this. If we don't do something different, 5 or 10 years from now, this is going to be a big problem, because with the average age being what it is, there's a lot of people retiring in the coming years.
So you mentioned somebody making in the heavy 6 figures. What's a typical compensation look like for an appraiser?
So the appraisal industry, I think, is similar to mortgages and real estate, in which, there are people in the industry making $40,000, $50,000 a year, and then other people making $40,000, $50,000 a month. But, I think an appraiser making, $100,000 plus is very, very reasonable.
Pretty common,
and I think it's very possible in this market. I have friends of mine that are appraisers that are in the $250,000, $350,000 range, and it's really, really good income.
What does it cost to get an appraisal for a typical 3-2 Florida?
Yeah, so, for a conventional appraisal, it depends a little bit company to company, but I think a safe number is in the low 500s, maybe in the, 475 to 550 range. Government appraisals are going to be a little bit more, maybe, 525 to 600. And then, the higher prices for multifamily properties, luxury homes, things of that nature.
Okay. Is Florida better off, worse off than other states in terms of the shortage or the pending shortage?
I'm told better.
Better off.
Yeah, I have complained about this on a pretty regular basis to those that I can. And they go, oh my goodness, you're averaging 10 to 14 days for an appraisal. That's amazing. And I said, well, it doesn't feel amazing to me, but it happens. But, when the government changed things around with the appraisal management companies and whatnot, they've put, and in my opinion, they've done this a little bit too much to an extreme. They've put the appraiser in the ultimate power position. You could dispute a value, but the dispute is handled with the original appraiser. In my opinion, that's a conflict of interest. We should have a third-party appraiser that can independently evaluate the two sides of it.
Are appraisers subject to the code of ethics that realtors are, or a different one or a similar one?
A different one, certainly not the same as the realtor industry. They do have a code of ethics that they have to follow, but they, the appraisal guidelines and policies that they have to follow are pretty strict, and to some extent, it could change a little bit from one lender to the other. So it's, an appraiser's job is very, very difficult, and it's, I laugh with my appraiser friends because when they hit value, nobody cheers for them. They did what they were expected to do, but when they come in low, they're the demon of the deal.
Of course, yeah. How long does it take to do an appraisal?
So on a typical house, they usually tell me that, they're anywhere from 4 to sometimes 10 hours in. It's again, everything is so unique. So, a typical appraisal is they're pulling 3 comparable sales located within a mile that have closed within 90 days. But, well, what if that's not there? Do they go further back than 90 days? Do they go further out from a mile? There's a lot of rules around that. So, how many comps are in the area and things of that nature all come into play and could dramatically increase the amount of time. One thing that we are seeing more and more of nowadays are appraisal waivers. What a lot of people don't realize, Jim, is that appraisals are uploaded to the agencies, Fannie, Freddie, et cetera. And a lot of times, if there's a lot of appraisals that have been done in the area that Fannie's already received, they'll actually waive the requirement for an appraisal. Now, borrower's qualification, down payment, all these things play a role. But I would say certainly on my refinances, probably 60% of my refis I've gotten appraisal waivers on, and I'm getting more and more of them on the purchase side of things. What we have to be careful with is I have a friend of mine in the business, in the mortgage business, and he had a deal where the inside of the house had real damage to it from a roof leak, but the borrower got an appraisal waiver. So the bank really had no idea that the home was damaged. And that's the risk with appraisal waivers and automated valuation models as opposed to having actual appraisals done.
Interesting stuff. Wow. Sounds like it's a whole can of worms, the whole
It is.
appraisal world. So I want to thank you for taking the time to come in and talk with us about that today, Scott. Where can people get in touch with you if they want to get in touch with you?
Yeah, so
I guess is why they would do it is because they want to.
So the best way to get a hold of me for whatever is really FortMyersMortgageExpert.com. That is not only my website, that's where you'll find me on all the social media avenues as well. My office is on College Parkway here, and whatever anybody needs, if there's a situation to help a real estate agent, a consumer, even a competitor, anything I could do to help, just reach on out to me and I'll do everything I can.
Good stuff. And we'll be sure to find your podcast and YouTube content too,
Absolutely.
Scott. All right. Hey, and if you really want to get in touch with us, you could do that too. You can just send an email to shows@rpcra.org, and we will be very pleased to hear from you. I want to thank everybody here at the association, including Jerry Johnson.
Wow, I'm included. Thank you, Jim.
You are included here at the association.
Thank you as well.
And again, thank you so much for listening. We really do appreciate that. And if you're getting something from the program, why not let a friend know? And maybe they can become an even more savvy consumer just like you. Again, my name is Jim Sanville, and we'll be looking forward to speaking with you again next time.
Thanks for listening to the Royal Palmcast. Be sure to listen again every week on your favorite podcast app and visit the Royal Palm Coast Realtor Association website at rpcra.org and our social media pages, including Facebook and our YouTube channel. Check out all of our RPCRA platforms and make sure to subscribe and share. For information about this show or other RPCRA productions, we'd love to hear from you. Email us at shows@rpcra.org. This has been a production of the Royal Palm Coast Realtor Association.